Welcome to the Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serena Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions.
Hello, Frugalista, and welcome to today's episode. But first, before I get to introducing my guest, if you love this podcast, please leave a rating or comment and check out the Joyful Frugalista podcast group, as well as the Joyful Frugalista on Instagram. Today, I'm joined by James Wrigley, one of Australia's most followed financial advisors and the author of Retire Life Ready, Practical Steps to Build Your Wealth and Live Your Ideal Retirement. With over 2 decades of experience, James has helped thousands of Australians take control of their finances and plan for retirement that reflects their dreams. His new book is a no-nonsense guide to building wealth, reducing debt, and designing your future on your own terms. Welcome, James, and congratulations on your book. Isn't it a great feeling when you see the book?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Serena. Thanks for having me. And it's just, I get a smile on my face when you're holding it up there. It's like, because I've only seen two copies of it. They sent me a couple of copies of it. I got on the bookshelf at home, and then a few have gone out to different podcasts and other media. So I'm still getting a bit of a buzz when I see the actual book in someone's hands. I can't wait to see it in real life when I'm sitting, see someone sitting by the pool or on the train or something reading it. I'll be excited to see that for the first time.
So for listeners, I was fortunate to get an advance copy. So I am recording this about a month before the official release. So I am lucky to have a special pre-release copy. But by the time you listen to this, you'll be able to buy them easily.
Yes. Yep.
So retirement. For some people, it might feel like a long way off. For some, it's coming around the corner fairly soon. And for some, they wish it was coming around the corner fairly soon. Do most Australians feel optimistic about retirement?
Look, I think they do. I would say I think they do. There's always going to be a cohort that aren't, but I would say on average, I think people are optimistic about retirement, particularly because we're getting to a point where a lot of people that head to retirement over the next 5 to 10 years or so, they will have had the benefit of the superannuation system for most of their working life, and then there's the backup of the age pension system. So I think between the super system and the age pension system, there's a bit of a safety net. That means that the majority of people are feeling okay about heading to retirement.
I'm always surprised, though, the amount of people who don't have super or don't have much super, particularly people who've been self-employed or maybe have taken more of a caring role in the family.
Absolutely. That's the hard part. The superannuation system works incredibly well if you're an employee for the 30 odd years or so of your working life, and you don't take any big career breaks. Maybe it's raising children, working part-time, sickness, injury, caring for others, all of these kind of things. It works really well for that cohort of people that just work for 30 or 40 years in an employed role. But those that work for themselves, those that have periods of time out of the workforce, then the superannuation system is definitely challenged for them.
So now a related question about retirement is, does everyone want to retire? And I ask this particularly because you have some really good examples in the early part of your book.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more and more people, certainly a younger demographic of clients that I work with in the financial advice that I provide. There's a younger demographic of clients that, at least at this stage of their life, they're working towards not needing to work, but they can't kind of comprehend not working. They always kind of say, well, what am I going to do with my time? But then as we see people as they get into their late 50s, early 60s, the idea of retirement becomes more and more kind of realistic for them, and it's something that they want to do, where they trade showing up to work every day for a bit more leisure time in their life instead.
Yeah, it's a fun one or a funny one, isn't it? I was chatting with Mr. Aussie Firebug recently, who retired quite early. He was on the fire journey,
Yes.
and after a year or so, he was like, "Oh, but my friends aren't retired. There's no one to play with," and he's actually gone back to work. He's started a business and he's doing other things.
We see that often. So you get people that do whether through following the fire movement, where they're living frugally and saving a whole lot of money, or through other some means. Maybe they sell a business, maybe they get a windfall, they get an inheritance, or whatever it might be. But yeah, if you're 30 something or 40 something or 50 something, and everyone around you is still going to work on Monday morning, what are you going to do with your time? And so that's a big part of the book. The first kind of section of the book is dedicated to this idea of, well, what are you actually aspiring to? What are you going to do? Who are you going to surround yourself with? What's the life that you want to lead? Design that first, and then let's look at the numbers to help support that retirement. But start with the life you want to lead first.
I know it's a big one, isn't it? Thinking about all the sorts of things you might want to do. Which brings me to how much you need in retirement. Now, the Australian Financial Service Authority regularly publishes data on what it assesses for what people need in a comfortable retirement. And as we podcast, they've just recently released a figure. So the figure for a couple, just in case you didn't happen to have this all to hand, which you probably don't, because I know I should explain that James is on holidays and he's taken a bit of time out on his holidays just to chat with us all today, which is great. But the current comfortable retirement figure is 75,319 for a couple. So, do most Australians have that amount?
So the report that they published, that then the follow up part of that report is then where does that money come from? So at that kind of level, that $75,000 a year or so for a couple, that's often someone that's living partly from their own resources and partly from an age pension. They'll have a follow up number to say how much do you need in superannuation to be able to support this type of lifestyle. And I think certainly, there's a particular demographic of clients that I work with, but I think that they are. I've historically been critical of those numbers that get published, that particular one that you're referring to. In my experience, it's been unders, what most people would describe as a comfortable retirement. The big thing to look at in the definition there is that they describe a comfortable retirement as travelling overseas once every 7 years. And there's a lot of people that I've worked with over the years that have this idea of they want to travel a lot. They want to travel overseas regularly in the first period of time in their retirement. And that tends to cost a bit more than those numbers that they're suggesting in that paper that they publish. I think it's every quarter or something that they publish it.
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense because it's a time in your life when you can travel. And often people are wanting to do that travel before they hit their 80s because that's when the travel insurance really spikes. Is that your experience working with clients?
Absolutely, it's always been the nearly 20 years that I've been doing this. There's always that kind of countdown timer getting towards 80, where it gets incredibly difficult to get travel insurance on the other side of 80. And then there's particular countries like America that people try to steer clear of a lot, because the healthcare system can be so expensive if you don't have any insurance over there. So there is this clock that's ticking down. What we tend to see is if someone retired around the age of 60, pretty typical retirement type age, we typically see that they have around 10 years or so where they're pretty active. If they've got the means to, they might be off traveling the world. They might be touring around Australia. They buy their caravan and they spend 2 years or 3 years traveling around Australia.
The grey nomads.
The grey nomad thing. There's one client that I worked with for such a long period of time, and I loved their lifestyle. They were from a suburb of Melbourne, but they had a car and a caravan, and they would head up north to Cairns, and they would park themselves up there for the winter, 3 or 4 months on end. When it got too hot up there, they'd slowly make their way back down to Melbourne and see their family in Melbourne for a few months over the summer. And they just went up and down the east coast of Australia for probably 10 years or more. And they had an absolute ball. The people that they met in the caravan parks and so forth, that they loved it. So, it's that generally kind of 60 to early 70s is this kind of more active period of time. And then things tend to start to slow down. People have been to the places that they want to be to, that they want to go to. Australia's a long way away from other parts of the world, and they can't be bothered, with the 24-hour flights to get to other parts of the world and the jet lag and everything that comes with that. So it tends to slow down a little bit after that.
Yeah, it's tiring. My dad and stepmom went on the whole European boat cruise last year, and it sounds fantastic when planning for it, and the photos look fantastic, but they were so exhausted afterwards.
Yeah. Everyone loves to come back home again. Everyone gets so excited for the 4 or 5 or 6 weeks that they might be away, and it's amazing. And for a lot of people, they've worked their whole lives to be in a position to be able to start to do some of these kind of things. But everyone loves to come back home again. They always comment about how much they enjoyed the trip, but how much they loved coming back home again too.
Oh, look, I was the same. We went to Italy and Greece last year, and that had been on my bucket list. I'd always wanted to go to Italy. And look, it was lovely. But I think I came back and went, we've got such a strong history of Italian heritage in Australia now. And actually, I found some of the food in Australia, the Italian food, to be actually of a much better standard. And it probably makes sense because we've got, so much Italian, so many Italians came here, and we've got such a fabulous produce as well.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
But going back to these figures, so you've been critical for a long time about how these figures come to be. In your experience, what for a comfortable retirement should most people be looking for?
So I always said the number about $80,000, and so this is kind of creeping up towards that $80,000 mark. The comfortable number for this kind of ASFA report that you're referring to, a number of years ago, it was $60-something thousand a year, and that was a long way away from what I was experiencing people spending in the reality of their retirement. Even people that were part funding themselves, part funding aged care. We're not necessarily talking about multi-millionaires that are funding things themselves. They're all spending far more than what these ASFA numbers were suggesting. Now, these are people that were typically travelling overseas once a year, not once every 7 years. They were spending a lot more. That number now, what we tend to see is a couple living comfortably tends to cost about $80,000 a year, and then you add the overseas travel on top of that. So depending on where someone's going and how long they're going for, and whether they're flying business class and how high they might be up in the cruise ship and so forth, that might be a $10,000 overseas holiday. It might be a $50,000 or $60,000 overseas holiday, depending on what people are doing. But we tend to see the day-to-day living of just being in Australia and eating out every now and then, and domestic travel, insurance on a couple of cars, and home and contents insurance and those kind of things, tends to sit about the $80,000 mark. So these ASFA numbers are getting pretty close to what we're experiencing people actually living and spending in retirement.
That all makes sense, particularly. Rates seem to always go up. Like we've had the big property boom of 2022, 2023, but consequently the unimproved values of land has gone up. So rates and a whole range of things have gone up, and then inflation has an impact too, I guess, on retirees.
Yeah, well, inflation's an interesting topic. So, yes, in the last few years it's gone up, but in the earlier part of my financial advice career, it was really common to see people retire in a particular amount of money. Like it might have been $60,000 a year back then, or $65,000 a year, whatever it might have been, the best part of 20 years ago. And for most of the time, their spending just flatlined. They weren't taking more and more money out each year. With inflation, things getting more expensive. Inflation was low and didn't move for such a long period of time that people were just taking this flat line. If they were taking $5,000 a month or $6,000 a month or $7,000 or whatever the number might have been, that spending didn't change for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. It was such a long period of time. It was only in this last kind of 4 or 5 years, as inflation's really taken off and everything's gotten a bit more expensive, as you're saying, that we're now seeing clients when they're coming into the office saying, hey, James, I could do with another $500 a month, or I could do with another $1,000 a month because this thing's going on or that thing's going on, or they take a couple of $1,000s out because their car rego's due and their insurance is due and their home insurance is due, and they take a lump sum of money from their super fund to cover these bills when they all come at the one time. So, yeah, the earlier part, people were just, they weren't spending, the spending wasn't increasing over time, but certainly in the last 4 and 5 years, it's increased pretty dramatically with the cost of everything.
Yeah, definitely. So with these figures, once again, and I know we've talked about the differences and how much, the reality might be, but they do assume home ownership, don't they?
They do. Yep. So they are based on home ownership. So go on.
I was just going to follow on to that to say, how important then is it to reduce your mortgage heading into retirement?
Yeah, the retirement system in Australia, whether it's the superannuation system, whether it's the age pension system, whether it's the healthcare cards and these other kind of support mechanisms that are available for people, that whole system just works so much better if you own your own home. So we highly encourage, and I talk about it in the book, whatever it may mean in terms of your superannuation accumulation or anything else that you do. For the vast majority of people, really high up on their priority lists as they head towards retirement is to do what you can to own your own home outright. Now, obviously, that's become increasingly more difficult over the years as the prices of houses have gone up and so forth. And there's certain people, because of life circumstances, haven't been able to buy a house, or they've lost their house or something like that. But as I said, really towards the top of that list, we really encourage people to, wherever that house may be and whatever it may look like, to try and own your own home. The flow-on effect of age pension entitlements and healthcare card entitlements and all of these other support mechanisms that are available for people to help with their retirement, they just work so much better if you own your own home than if you don't.
I'm laughing because you may or may not know that my most recent book is called How to Pay Off Your Mortgage in 10 Years. So read my book. There's some tips there, and follow James' advice on how important it is for your retirement to pay off your mortgage. And corresponding to that, what about things like investment properties? Like, often as people are thinking about retirement, they often think, oh, look, I might have an investment property or two. It'd be good to, in retirement, to sort of tinker around and fix things up. What about the mortgages then on those investment properties?
They need to go too. I'm a big advocate for, and there's a section in the book where I talk about, there's this idea of good debt and bad debt and so forth. And as I talk about, debt's debt. As you head into retirement, that needs to go. Whether it's the debt on your own home, whether it's the debt on an investment property. If it's a debt on an investment property, whilst you're working, it's okay, you're earning an income, you're getting some rent from the property, and together you can, between your income and the rent that you get, you can make repayments on the mortgage. That's okay. But all of a sudden, when the work stops and you stop earning a wage, the bank still wants their repayments. And so you might get rent in, yes, but then that money just needs to go off to pay the loan repayments and all the other expenses associated with owning that investment property. It doesn't leave you anything left over to spend. If you've got this other big pool of assets, a big super balance or other savings and shares and whatnot, go for your life. But the vast majority of people don't have an investment property with a debt on it and a big pile of other assets that they can use to live off at the same time. Often the investment property is part of the big pool of assets that they're trying to use to help fund retirement. So that debt needs to go. Now that might mean pulling money from superannuation, or it might actually mean even selling the investment property. Now, the downside of investment properties, particularly as you head into retirement, is the rental income, the cash that you get to spend from that property, it's typically quite low. You've got all of the expenses associated with holding a property. We're just talking about land tax and council rates and bits and pieces. You've still got all of those expenses that you have to pay. And it's only after all of those expenses are paid that you get to then spend the money that's left over from there. And chances are that's probably a very small amount of money relative to the value of the property.
Yeah, well said. It's I think people often think that landlords have like rivers of gold from their rental income, but actually,
no. I've often joked, and I've done some content on this, and I haven't spoken about it for quite some time, but and I haven't done the numbers on this recently, but in the last couple of years, you would earn more money if you owned your own. Assume you owned your own home, you would earn more money as a couple from the age pension and having no assets than if you had one investment property that was worth just above the asset threshold that disqualified you from an age pension, and you collected the rent on it. The government would pay you more age pension. It's $40-something thousand a year in age pension for a couple, versus the rental income you'd get from that one investment property is nowhere near the 40-something a year. after you've paid all of your expenses. People often have to let that one sink in a little while, but yeah, owning property into retirement's often not great unless you've got a lot of other assets.
Wow, I didn't realise that. That makes sense. So what about shares? Are shares treated differently or are shares still the same?
So in terms of an asset perspective for your, whether you're going to qualify for an age pension or anything like that, it's all treated the same. It's still an asset. The advantage that things like shares have, often the dividend that you'll earn from the share is, if you've got the right ones at least anyway, the dividend that you'll earn from the share is often higher than the rental income you'll earn from the investment property. But you also don't have all of those same holding costs associated with the shares as you do the investment property. You don't have to pay land tax, you don't have to pay insurance, you don't have to pay council rates, the hot water service doesn't break, you don't have all of these expenses associated with it. So you'll earn the dividend income from the shares, but then that pretty much all of that is spending money. If you've got your structuring right, you might not have to pay a whole lot of tax on that dividend income either. You've got all that dividend income that you can use to live off to support your retirement.
Well, that makes sense then about why so many older retirees are investing so heavily in shares, particularly ones that have good dividend yields.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we see a bit of a rotation. Some people will hold an investment property heading into their retirement, provided they've got enough other assets to support their income needs. But we see a lot of people, the investment property's done its job. It's helped boost their assets up, and then they sell it. They put it into other assets that are better suited to fund their retirement.
So the obvious question when thinking about retirement is superannuation. So what about superannuation? How important is it?
Look, I think so. We commented right at the very start of the podcast that we're very nearly entering a period of time where the people heading into retirement, provided they've been employees, will have had the benefit of the super system for their whole working life. The superannuation system is this kind of tax structure that exists to encourage people to help fund their own retirement. You really can't beat it in terms of a low tax environment here in Australia, particularly once you get to retirement. There's no tax on the earnings, there's no tax on the pension payments that are paid out to you over the age of 60 on up to the first $2 million worth of assets that you've got. So for those that are self-employed, we hear it all the time. When I was younger, I didn't pay too much attention to super. I didn't want my money tied up. I didn't want someone telling me when I could access my money. I kept it all and I did these other things. And then they get to 50-something and they're like, oh, wow, actually, the super system's amazing. You look at all of these tax benefits. I wish I had taken it a little bit more seriously. And then they're in this mad scramble to try and pile as much money as they possibly can into super, whereas they would have had a whole lot more of it if they just added slowly to it over time.
And there's restrictions now on how much you can put in per year.
That's it. So limits on how much you can get in each year. There's what's called a concessional, or the pre-tax amount of money that goes into super is limited to $30,000 a year. That includes what your employer contributes for you as well. You can make up the difference yourself. There's an after-tax contribution, what's called a non-concessional contribution. So think of that as some savings you might have in the bank. You can deposit into your super fund. That sits at $120,000 a year, or you can use the current year plus the next couple of years and put in a bigger lump sum of up to $360 in one go. There's a downsizing contribution limit. So for people that are over the age of 55, have owned their home for more than 10 years and they decide to sell it, they can top up their superannuation by up to $300,000 excuse me, from the sale proceeds. So there's limits on how much you can get in over time. The super system is best. You get the best out of the super system if you add a regular amount of money to it for a very long time, rather than trying to pile money in right at the end. You want to be putting money in regularly for a very, very long time. And then there's some caps that exist at the other end as well when you're starting to access the money. So there's a cap that exists on how much you can transfer into the tax-free pension side of superannuation. That currently sits at $2 million. But then after the age of 60, you get tax-free. That's when you can start one of these pensions. You need to satisfy a retirement condition. You get tax-free access to your money, and it's unrestricted. Complete unrestricted access to however much money you might have in super, entirely tax-free. You can pull it all out if you really wanted to. Maybe not a great idea for most, but you could do it if you wanted to.
So you must see some clients who are living the good life now on the basis of their super.
Yeah, absolutely. They're people that have thought about this for a long period of time. It's less, maybe less common now, but back in the early days of superannuation, when contribution rates were quite low, there were some employers out there, the university system, for example, like the university system's been paying 14% or more super contributions for a very, very, very long time. So it's really common to see someone that's had a long career in the university system, not necessarily a lecturer that's getting all of these extra loadings and bits and pieces. It can just be ordinary people with ordinary jobs in the university system that have got lots of money when they head into retirement. Some of the earlier, some of the airlines and some of the now privatised parts of the government, some defined benefit funds where people are retiring. They've had ordinary jobs, but they're retiring on $1.5 and $2.5 million superannuation balances. That's a lot of money to then be able to use and live off to help fund a retirement. So yeah, there are a lot of people out there living the good life in retirement based on their super balances.
Yeah, disclosure, my husband is on a defined benefit scheme. He retired but's gone back to work, and I'm on a defined benefit scheme. So yeah.
Yeah, they don't. Some of them are incredible, and yeah, you can. That doesn't take a whole lot with a lot of those schemes. It doesn't take a whole lot to have a huge superannuation balance if you've worked for that employer for a long enough period of time.
But still, I'm always shocked the number of my colleagues who are on the same scheme I am on who don't take the time to understand it. They're all, busy. There's an urgent
Yeah,
ministerial issue. They're busy trying to get promoted and get ahead, and they're running around doing all this busyness. But I'm like, hang on, did you know if you just contributed a bit extra, you get these benefits, and there's a
yeah,
multiplying effect.
yeah.
And I think this happens, doesn't it? You get so busy with life, you don't take time to look at the benefits.
That's it. And like with the defined benefit ones, as people get towards 55 or 60 or some of these kind of later ages, they all then start to look at it and they go, oh, okay, I need to have been in the system for like 15 years to maximise out my multiple. I hit the maximum when I'm 60. It stops accumulating, and one of the airline ones, there's a particular benefit that stops at 55. The defined benefit calculation part stops at age 55. And they all know it then, but yes, in the earlier years, it would have been good if they knew how to use the system to their advantage a little bit earlier.
Most definitely. So what about healthcare costs in retirement?
Yeah, but it's a bit of a roller coaster, the healthcare costs. So, assuming someone's they don't have major health complications earlier on in their retirement, if it's a pretty ordinary kind of retirement journey, they'll have a period of time, that first 10 years or so where things are pretty active and they're out and about doing things, and by and large not a whole lot in the way of kind of health concerns. But then we have this kind of slower period of time, a bit more domestic travel, maybe a little bit less overseas travel. But then it can, for some people, healthcare really start to kind of ramp up in the late 70s through to early 80s. They might need to then get some of the home care packages, whether that's assistance into the home that they have to pay some level of contribution to. There's a whole lot of government support for it, but they have to contribute something themselves. Or then there's the whole residential aged care system. If someone gets to a stage where it's unsafe for them to be living in their own home, they need around the clock care, then they move into the residential aged care system. That's difficult. But the residential aged care system is incredibly difficult for a couple where both people are still alive but only one person needs to go into care. I reckon that's the most expensive period of time that a couple will have to deal with in their retirement. Even more expensive than those active years when they're travelling overseas right at the very start. It can be a real strain on family finances in some households. Where one person needs to go into care, but the other is still capable of living at home.
So why is that so much more expensive? Is that because one has still got like the house and the rates and everything else and still needing care?
Yeah, so on the residential aged care side of things, there's an assessment that's done when someone first needs to go into care based on their assets, or what's called their means. if you're deemed to have the means to pay for your care, then you're asked to contribute towards the cost of your care. Now, for a couple, if one person's still residing in the home is exempt from that means testing assessment. But if they have enough other assets, so if they've got a generous super balance, or if they've still got the investment property or whatever it might be, they still might be deemed to have the means to pay for the residential aged care, to pay for the room itself. And so you can end up in this situation where someone's still at home, the costs of running that house need to still go on. And just because there's one person living there doesn't mean that the cost of running that house is half what it was when two people were there. It might drop a fraction. So that house still needs to be run. And then all of a sudden you've got the cost of someone's residential aged care. And it's kind of three broad parts to that. There's the cost of the room itself, which depending on where you can be start at several hundreds of thousands of dollars, can go north of $1 million in some parts of Australia. Then you've got the cost of the care itself. So there's the $60-something a day basic daily fee that everyone has to pay regardless of their means. Plus there's a contribution that you have to make towards that care based on your means. So the more money you have, the more you have to pay. And then there's this kind of extra services part as well. So some facilities will say, here we charge an extra $10 a day for these things. It's a condition of entry here that you have to pay that. Now, some of those rules are changing. Probably by the time this podcast is out, the rules will change a little bit afterwards. But by and large, that system still exists. You're going to have your cost of your room, your cost of your care, plus some additional services. And that can run into the tens of thousands of dollars a year to cover those costs. That's a big stretch for some people.
Yeah, it is indeed. And I've seen that too, like particularly with, within the extended family, children expecting to get this big inheritance, but a lot of properties had to be sold to pay for this care.
Yeah, where it's a single person, it's often a bit simpler. It often means the house gets sold, as you've just mentioned. If the house is sold, then that money can be used to pay for the room in the residential aged care. Then you've just got the ongoing costs of being there. It's a bit more manageable. But unless the house is going to be sold, it's an expensive exercise for people to have to be dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. So finally, do you have a Frugalista tip to share?
Yeah, we were talking about this before we press record on Netflix. So when Netflix bought in, Netflix, they keep jacking up the cost of the subscription, and there's different tiers and so forth. I think the top one runs at nearly $30 a month, I think, at the moment. When all of that came in, I was like, I'm going to opt for this ads version. Let's just see what this ads version looks like. And that was maybe $5 or $6, $7 a month or something like that. And I've stuck with the ads version ever since. I was a little bit worried that, so I've got two young kids, I was a little bit worried that the ads version was going to then be putting these advertisements in front of my kids. Not only was they'd crack that their show gets interrupted, that there's some advertisement, but also, what are these ads that are going to be shown to my kids? I was a little bit worried about that. But it turns out there's no ads in all of the kids' shows. So the kids not interrupted whatsoever. Now, if I'm watching a show and my wife's watching something, or if we're watching something together, every now and then you have to deal with an advertisement. It's not the end of the world. And so we run throughout the year, the really cheap Netflix subscription. It's only when if we've gone away on a holiday now that I'll up the subscription so that we can download shows onto more devices to watch on the aeroplane. So for a brief period, we'll bump it up, and then once the holiday's over, we'll drop it back down again. Yeah, that's my money saving tip.
Well, that's great. And it's amazing, isn't it, how we've gone from that excitement of, oh my goodness, there's this thing called Netflix, to so many different streaming platforms now.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, they can well and truly get out of hand, and we do like I suspect most other households do. If there's a particular show that we want to watch, or if there's something on one of these streaming platforms, we'll get the subscription for the month or two or whatever it is to watch the particular show. But then once that's over, cancel it. So we're not paying for half a dozen subscription services all year round. Netflix stays there, but the others kind of come and go based on the time of the year and what shows are on that we want to watch.
Yeah, it's hard though. Like I know I've signed up to Binge before. They often have, special deals that are quite cheap and you go, oh, that's fine just for 3 months or whatever. But then on the fourth month, it's like, oh, how did I forget that? These days I put that
Yeah.
into my online calendar, my Google Calendar to remind me. But even so, sometimes I forget.
Yeah, they sneak it through. They don't send you a reminder or anything like that. I've got it's like because we ended up having some money taken from one of our bank accounts, but the bank account and the credit card, it's one of the only notifications I have on my phone. If something gets debited from there, it pops up. So I'll see this debit go through. I'm like, oh, that's right. I was meant to reduce the Netflix down. It's not, they've charged me $28, not the $6, and so I'll go in and drop it back down again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, James, for being my guest and especially for taking time out on your family holiday to do so. Retire Life Ready is out now at all good bookstores and online. And where can people find you?
On the social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you can just search my name, James Wrigley, Wrigley. You can find me across all of those places. In terms of a day job, First Financial. So I'm a financial advisor at a business called First Financial. Yeah, check out our website and that's us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Serena.